Hey there, survivors. Thanks for tuning into this story. If you're new here, please consider subscribing. It really helps me keep these stories coming. And while you're here, let me know in the comments where you're listening from. Now let's get started. I've always believed that the purpose of a call center is to be a voice of reason and calm during times of uncertainty. It's where frantic people dial in hopes of finding answers, reassurance, or just someone to listen. I never imagined I'd be forced to grapple with something as terrifying as a zombie outbreak. But let me start at the beginning, when everything first began to unravel. My name is Maya Porter, and I've worked at the Western District Emergency Call Center for 10 years. Ever since I was a kid, I wanted to help others during a crisis. In my mind, it was a noble calling. Over the years, I handled countless urgent calls, accidents, missing people, even the occasional natural disaster. Stress was part of the job, but I always believed I could handle it. That all changed when the first emergency alert scrolled across our screens. Emergency alert, zombie outbreak detected. Please remain indoors. Stay tuned for updates. At first, we couldn't believe our eyes. The word zombie felt absurd, like something from a movie or a late-night horror show. We thought it might be an elaborate prank, a glitch in the system, or some bizarre test. But the calls started pouring in within seconds, and I realized we were facing something far more serious than a prank. The entire call center, normally filled with measured chatter, fell silent except for the shrill ringing of phone lines. I remember the moment my phone lit up with the first call. My headset beeped, and a trembling voice asked if we knew what was happening downtown. The caller described strange figures wandering the streets, moving in erratic patterns. They mentioned how these beings appeared unresponsive to warnings and kept going as if driven by a single-minded hunger. I relayed this information to my supervisor, Martin. He frowned, shook his head, and told me to keep the caller on the line. The protocols for unusual threats were vague at best, but we tried to follow every rule. Yet no training manual could have prepared us for walkers roaming the city. Within minutes, an internal announcement flashed. Emergency alert, zombie apocalypse. Follow lockdown procedures. Stand by for further instructions. We stared at each other, speechless. The word apocalypse conjured images of total collapse, something so far outside our typical scope. But the moment we doubted it, we received call after call confirming the danger. Some people referred to them as zombies, others used infected, the undead, or simply those things. The stories were too consistent to dismiss. They're walking right through store windows like they don't feel pain. My neighbor tried to bite someone. They swarm at any sound. How do we stop them? No official guidelines existed for a zombie outbreak, so we fumbled to provide information. Secure your doors, stay hidden, await rescue. But the truth was, we had no idea if rescue was even possible. We had an old emergency protocol for widespread riots, instructing us to help coordinate safe routes out of the city. But the roads were blocked by abandoned cars, and many survivors couldn't risk going outside. Some reported that these walkers were drawn to noise, light, even movement at a distance. Every new piece of information sounded more incredible than the last, yet it was all happening around us. I heard my coworker Jaime, on the next desk over, taking a call from someone who was stuck in a high-rise building. The building's power had shut off, and they were surrounded by eerie silhouettes in the hallways. Jaime tried to calm the person, but I could hear the fear quaking in his own voice. When I looked around, I saw the same dread reflected in everyone's eyes. Several hours passed in a blur. The call center was flooded with voices crying out for assistance. I tried to keep my voice steady, guiding people to bar doors, barricade windows, and remain hidden. Yet I could sense that many calls ended in sudden silence, cut off mid-sentence, replaced by static or a sudden thud. At some point, the lights flickered. Our main power grid was under duress. Martin ran around, urging us to stay seated and keep answering calls. He insisted the generator would hold until the power company could fix the issue, but no one was sure if that was even possible anymore. Our digital maps, which we used to advise callers on safe routes, were starting to overload. Pins for danger zones dotted almost every area of the city. Traffic cameras showed flickering images of abandoned highways, with figures shuffling between the cars. One call that still haunts me came from a young teenager, maybe 14, who was alone at home. They whispered into the phone that their parents had gone out to gather supplies and hadn't returned. "I keep hearing scratching noises at the back door," the teenager said. "What do I do?" I told them to turn off the lights, hide and stay on the phone. Then I heard the sound of splintering wood in the background. The teenager let out a short cry, and the line went dead. All I could do was sit there, feeling my heart hammer, staring at the phone in disbelief. No one wanted to acknowledge it aloud, but we sensed the city was losing its battle against the zombie outbreak faster than we could process. Phones were going quiet, neighborhoods were going dark, and official channels were losing contact. Our center had no windows on the main floor, just a series of secure doors leading to the outside. Sometime around midnight, our shift manager tried to step out and survey the parking lot from a side exit. He never came back. We searched for him, but all we found was his walkie-talkie lying on the ground near the door. Only then did we begin to wonder if we should evacuate. But where would we go? It seemed every corner of the city was under siege by these relentless zombies. Also, the entire center was considered a key facility for emergency communications. Abandoning it meant cutting off many who might still be calling for help. Still, thoughts of survival started to overshadow duty. A few co-workers huddled by the break room, whispering about a plan to escape in a company truck. Others, terrified, insisted we had to remain at our posts. Martin, before he vanished, had said that leaving would cause mass panic. But ironically, we were already in the midst of it. The only real leadership left was from our lead dispatcher, Patricia. She was level-headed and tried to keep us on track, dividing us into teams. One team would answer calls, another would monitor any form of news we could access, radio signals, government broadcasts, or even social media. But that last method was soon rendered useless. Phone lines and internet connections were failing rapidly. By 3 a.m., the generator kicked in, running on fumes. The overhead lights dimmed to half. A pale glow cast across rows of cubicles, revealing how exhausted everyone looked. I remember thinking we had all aged a decade in a single night. Even so, the calls kept coming, and we kept answering. At some point, I realized I couldn't keep track of time. The windows in the upper floor were covered with emergency shutters, leaving us in a world of artificial light. My stomach growled, but I was too rattled to eat anything. The sound of phones ringing and voices crying became an echo chamber in my mind. Every so often we'd pick up a line only to hear static or faint groaning. The more horrifying calls were the ones where we heard nothing except labored breathing and soft footsteps. It felt like a glimpse into a reality too grim to face head-on. We just quietly ended those calls, unsure what else to do. Each new emergency alert that popped up on our monitors sounded more ominous than the last. Emergency alert, zombie outbreak. State of emergency, avoid contact, seek shelter immediately. Those words repeated until we could recite them from memory. They hardly felt real anymore. The lines of worried voices were unending, each pleading for answers we didn't have. All we could do was urge them to stay safe. But how safe can anyone be in the midst of a zombie outbreak? Then came the strangest call of all. The voice on the line was calm, almost eerily so. They asked me if I believed in the New World Order, claiming these walkers were the final stage of some ancient prophecy. I tried to redirect the conversation, but the caller just kept talking in a monotone voice about how humanity was being cleansed. Eventually, the line cut out. Even though the exchange was odd, I couldn't shake the sense of dread it left me with. By the time the night blurred into dawn, if it was dawn, because we couldn't see the sun, I realized I hadn't checked on my own family. My mother lived a few miles away, and normally I would have called her to make sure she was all right. But between calls, the line was busy or out of service, I wanted to run to her, to see if she was safe, but I felt chained to my desk by the weight of responsibility. I looked over at Jamie, who was sitting next to me. He seemed equally torn. His loved ones were across town, and he kept glancing at his silent phone in despair. "We can't stay here forever, Maya," he whispered, during a brief lull in the calls. "We have no idea what's happening beyond these walls." I nodded, eyes full of worry. "I know. But if we leave, who will help all these people calling in? We might be the only voice they have." Jamie stared at his monitor, where a new government notice flickered. "Emergency alert. Seek immediate shelter. Stand by for possible evacuation orders." We heard rumors that the National Guard might come, or maybe some specialized disaster team. But each rumor felt like a faint hope crumbling under the weight of reality. The city, from what we could gather, was already swarming with walkers, a term we had started using ourselves. I don't remember the exact moment tensions inside the call center boiled over. It might have been right after hearing about a co-worker who went to the generator room and didn't come back. Or maybe it was the second or third time we heard pounding at the heavy metal doors. The security cameras went offline, so we had no way of knowing if it was just frightened survivors seeking refuge or the actual zombies. Our only clue was the occasional moan echoing in the hallway. Patricia ordered everyone to stay put, but a small group decided they had to attempt an escape. I saw them gather minimal supplies, some water bottles, a flashlight, a first aid kit, and head to the loading dock. They didn't say much, just exchanged a silent nod. We never heard from them again. For all I know, they might have made it out. Or they might have encountered a group of walkers and joined the growing ranks of the undead. The uncertainty was crushing. The calls kept coming, though the frequency had begun to drop. Fewer people had working phones or enough battery life, and the voices we did hear often sounded weaker, speaking in hushed tones. We started to suspect that those still alive were running out of safe places to hide. Desperate for any scrap of good news, I kept my ear to the radio feed in our console. We were catching bits of emergency broadcasts from neighboring counties. Some areas were urging citizens to head to designated shelters, while others simply stated, "Emergency alert, hide, remain silent, barricade all doors." An eerie rumor floated through the static that the infection causing the zombie outbreak spread through bites or scratches. Another rumor claimed it was airborne, but that seemed less likely because plenty of people were still uninfected. Even so, we were all extra cautious about any wound or fever. Still, we had no official confirmation. The resources we needed, public health agencies, local news stations, had gone eerily silent. We were, for all intents and purposes, an island of functioning communication in a sea of chaos. I was half dozing at my desk when a new call jolted me upright. It was from an older man who identified himself as a resident living near the outskirts of the city. His voice wavered, carrying a weight of sorrow and fear. "Hello?" he asked softly. "Am I still connected to the Western District Emergency Call Center?" "Yes," I answered, doing my best to sound calm. "You're speaking with Maya. Please tell me your situation." He sighed heavily. "I've barricaded myself in my basement. I lost my wife 2 days ago. I just got off the phone with my daughter. She's across the state, safe for now. But I can hear footsteps upstairs. They sound like not human footsteps." "Are you sure your barricade is secure, sir?" "I think so for now, but I'm running out of supplies and the air is stale. I'm not sure how long I can stay quiet. These walkers have been roaming the neighborhood, breaking through windows. I thought the basement would be safe, but..." His voice trembled. "I'm afraid they're going to break in soon." I tried to steady my breathing, to be the voice of reassurance. "Sir, we're doing everything we can. If you can stay hidden a little longer, rescue might arrive. Remember to keep all lights off, stay silent, and don't draw attention." He hesitated. "I wanted to call one last time. You've been a beacon of hope for us. I heard about your call center from my neighbor. Said you were helping people. I just needed to hear a human voice. Tears pooled in my eyes, but I tried not to let them show in my voice. "I'm here," I managed. "You're not alone. I promise we'll keep trying to guide people to safety." He let out a weak laugh. "You're a kind soul. My thanks to you and your co-workers. Take care of yourselves too." A sudden crash came from his end. I heard him gasp. The line went silent except for muffled scraping sounds. I waited, heart pounding, but he never came back to the phone. Eventually it cut to static. It was a stark reminder of what we were truly facing. Morale in the call center plummeted after that. We were all exhausted, hungry, and on edge. Some of my co-workers started having panic attacks. Others fought among themselves, debating whether we should risk going outside. The generator sputtered ominously, lights flickering more frequently. With every flicker I'd look around, expecting to see a shadowy figure in the corner. The calls grew sparser, but each one felt like a tiny lifeline connecting us to the world beyond our fortified walls. I dialed my mother's number again and again with no success. In my mind, I tried to picture her safe, but the dread wouldn't leave me. If only I could hear her voice, even for a minute, I could face this. But that call never came. I'm not sure if it was truly daylight when the overhead speakers buzzed and a final emergency broadcast message played. "Emergency alert. Seek immediate shelter. Evacuation teams are unable to reach many areas. If you are receiving this, remain indoors and away from doors and windows." The voice repeated, then cut out. We waited, but the speakers stayed silent. That was the last official notice we got before the screens in the call center went black, leaving only the emergency lights. Patricia gathered the remaining staff. Only about 7 of us were still at our desks. "Listen," she said quietly. "The system is failing. We don't have a direct line to any rescue teams, and we don't know if they'll ever make it here. Each of us has to decide what to do next." She looked tired, her hair disheveled, clothes stained with sweat. "We can stay here, hope the generator keeps running, and try to help anyone who might call. Or we can try to leave. But we don't know what's out there now. We don't even know if the roads are passable." A silence fell over us. One co-worker admitted he had kids across the city he hadn't heard from in hours. Another said she had an elderly parent alone at home. Nobody had comforting answers. The building was shaking with every gust of wind. Or maybe it was just my imagination. The entire structure felt as if it were mourning its own end. Before we could decide as a group, the phone lines that were still active started ringing again. An influx of calls, possibly from newly awakened survivors or people who found a working phone. We were overwhelmed. Patricia told me and Jaime to keep answering while she and 2 others tried to scrounge up supplies. I lost track of how many final pleas I heard in that next hour. A mother desperate to find medicine for her child. A caretaker trapped in a nursing home with limited resources. People stuck in rooftop gardens as zombies milled around below. Each time I gave the best instructions I could. Stay quiet, stay hidden, hope for rescue. But my words felt hollow, an echo of a system we knew had collapsed. Finally, at around what must have been mid-morning, a siren blared outside. It was faint, but it pierced the air like a distant cry for help. I stood up, straining to listen. The walkie-talkie on Martin's desk crackled. I rushed over to it, fiddling with the dial, hoping to catch any snippet of news. All I heard was a static-laced message. "Unreliable. Repeat. High risk. No guaranteed safe zones." It repeated a few times before dissolving into static. Jaime gave me a look that said everything. We were on our own now. In a moment of desperation, I decided to make one final broadcast over the center's public address system, which reached any connected phone lines on hold. Maybe, just maybe, someone would hear it. I pressed the button and mustered my calmest voice. "Attention, anyone who can hear this. This is Maya from the Western District Emergency Call Center. Due to the widespread zombie outbreak, we do not have confirmed safe evacuation routes. We advise everyone to remain in place, barricade all points of entry, and stay silent. If you have the ability to reach a secure shelter, proceed with extreme caution. We are doing our best to provide updates. Please, stay safe. We'll remain here as long as we can to help guide survivors. You are not alone. I ended the transmission, tears brimming in my eyes. Jamie placed a hand on my shoulder. That might be the last time many people hear a reassuring voice. The generator was nearly done. The flickering lights began to fade, leaving us under the pale glow of emergency fluorescence. We tried to hold on, hoping for a miracle. But as the minutes dragged on, the hum of the electronics got quieter. The computers we used to manage calls started powering down. We each took calls on our headsets, no longer able to see the caller ID or the map. I felt like I was drifting in darkness, tethered only by the voices of strangers. I remember one of the final calls I answered vividly. A person whispered that they were holed up in a church basement about 6 miles from us. They had water, a small group of people, and minimal food. They invited anyone who could make it there to join them, but they also mentioned that walkers roamed the streets, making any journey extremely risky. I thanked them for the information, hoping to pass it along, but then, abruptly, the lights died completely. My headset went silent. The hush that followed was unreal. We still had battery-powered lanterns scattered around, but the big machines, our lifeline to the outside world, were gone. Most of our co-workers had gathered near the center's entrance, deciding if we should make a break for the loading dock. Patricia's voice was shaky in the darkness. "We can't do much good here anymore. The lines are down. We're out of power. There's no one left to call." Jamie and I locked eyes. We knew that staying put meant we might starve, or worse, if zombies finally broke in. But leaving meant stepping into the unknown, braving the same horrors we'd been warning callers about. Either way, there was no guarantee of safety. In the faint lantern glow, I saw the emergency exit door at the end of the hallway. It had once been secured with an electronic lock. Now, with power gone, it was openable by hand. Outside, we could faintly hear the wind. A real sense of the city's hush drifted inside, as if everything had stopped. I took a deep breath, adrenaline flooding my veins. I could sense the presence of my remaining co-workers behind me. Some were resolute, others on the brink of panic. We had to decide, stay or go. In a final whispered huddle, Patricia laid out a plan. A small group would head to the generator room to see if there was any last attempt to restart it, while another group would check if the garage had a functioning vehicle. Jamie and I, along with whoever else chose to go, would carefully open the emergency exit and see what awaited us outside. And so, in those final moments, we parted ways. I looked into the eyes of people who had become like family during this crisis. We gave each other one last nod, uncertain if we'd ever meet again. The emergency exit door creaked as we pushed it open. Cold, stale air greeted us. The day, or night, was dim under a sky choked by ash-grey clouds. The outline of distant buildings looked warped, as if the world itself was in mourning. Somewhere in the distance, I thought I heard a low groan, or maybe a stray breeze. Every fiber in my being tensed. We had no way of knowing where the walkers lurked now. My heartbeat pounded in my ears, like a drum signaling an uncertain march into the unknown. I paused on the threshold, turning back for a moment. The call center was dark behind me, its once buzzing lines now silent. I could still picture the countless calls, the pleas, the final moments we witnessed through a phone line. The weight of it pressed on my chest. So many lives we couldn't save, so many voices we couldn't calm. But there was nothing left there for us. No power, no contact, no hope of rescue. Only the memories of frantic calls in the midst of a zombie outbreak. I stepped into the open, Jaime right beside me. Each step felt heavier than the last. My eyes scanned the deserted streets for any sign of movement. A broken street lamp flickered and died, leaving only the gloom of an abandoned world. We took a few more steps, hearts hammering, prepared to face whatever came. In that moment, a stray radio clipped on Jamie's belt crackled faintly, perhaps picking up a weak signal. But all we heard was static, occasionally punctuated by what might have been distant footsteps or faint echoes of moans. Then it fell silent again. No more calls rang out, no more updates flashed across screens. We were left with only each other, the dark streets, and the possibility that life existed beyond the next block, or maybe not. Somewhere behind us, the call center door slowly closed with a dull thud, sealing away the last vestiges of our old world. We moved forward into the unknown, uncertain if our choice was brave or foolish. If anyone else was out there surviving this zombie outbreak, we hoped we might find them. I don't know what became of Patricia and the others searching for a car or trying to revive the generator. I don't know if rescue ever arrived. I don't know how many calls went unanswered in the following days. The only thing I do know is that we had become the final link in a chain of desperate voices, and now that link was broken. But we were still alive, at least for the moment, and as long as we drew breath, we had hope. Even in a world where zombies wandered the streets, hope was the one thing that felt truly human. I wish I could tell you how it all ended. Maybe we found a shelter. Maybe we encountered a horde of walkers around the next corner. Maybe help arrived from somewhere we couldn't imagine. All I can say for certain is that we kept moving, each step a quiet prayer for one more hour of survival. That's where my story ends, for now, on the threshold of a new and frightening reality, with the last echoes of phone calls still ringing in my ears, reminding me that sometimes being the last voice on the line can be both a burden and a small, flickering light in the darkness. Thank you for listening. If this story sent shivers down your spine, don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling creepypastas. Your support keeps this channel alive. Until next time, stay vigilant and remember, curiosity can be quite the companion, and sometimes a curse.